So I decided to invest in a multiple solid state drive that goes in the computer, that goes in the place of where a floppy drive used to go. So basically you can plug in, you can have access to your solid state drives from the outside. It makes life really easy if you want to install Linux on a particular boot drive. So I looked on eBay, I looked on a few different, I've looked on Banggood as well, for some deals that were not too expensive, because it's basically an experiment to actually try to install Ubuntu on the physical hardware instead of on the virtual machine, because the virtual machine has got huge limitations because of the lack of access to the NVIDIA drivers and the hardware acceleration. And because I do video encoding quite a bit for my YouTube channel, it's a bit of a problem. Because it appears that because I'm basically stuck in the past, because I'm getting old, I'm living in the past. Because I'm still using XP, and I like XP because I'm just familiar with it, and I don't like change, I don't like new stuff, I really don't. But at the same time, I do need certain features to do my video encoding. That's basically all I need it for. Excuse me. So by having a caddy where you can plug in externally solid state drives, it also gives you the advantage that because solid state drives have got this little inherent problem where blocks get retired after so many uses. After you've written data, and if you're swapping data to a solid state drive a lot, over time your drive actually gets smaller. A lot of people don't realize that, but let's say you got a 20 gig drive, right? And after, say, a few years of use, it might shrink to something like 15 gigabyte, right? That might be an exaggeration, but the reason you lose space is because it uses read write, what do you call them, RAM, is it? Read access memory, as it ROM. No, ROM is read only memory. No, it's RAM, because it uses these solid state means of storing data. After you've written to a certain block of the drive and read from that block, and then deleted that block and written new data to that block, after that's happened so many times, that block gets retired. So it basically becomes completely inaccessible. So you might have blocks that are retired. Now, the problem with blocks like that is you can actually have data that's still in those blocks, but you can't access it anymore because they become retired. So what usually happens is the data is moved to a new block, and the address system is reassigned, so that, let's say that block that gets retired was called BLQ or something. Just give you an idea. It's like an address, just like house numbers has got numbers on them. You've got 20, 21, 22, 23. Let's say that block became retired. So BLQ would no longer be, it would become XXX or something, because it's redundant. And a new block that's reserved, you have so many reserved blocks, a new untouched reserve block would become XOQ, or 20, whatever you want to call it. So eventually, when you've used up all of your reserved blocks, once you've used them all up, you have no more reserves. So what happens then? Well, that's when your drive starts to shrink, right? It starts to get smaller and smaller. So as blocks are retired, data's moved to another block, but it's moved to a free block that's not being used, and you've got no more reserve. So your hard drive actually shrinks over time, so it gets smaller and smaller as blocks get retired. Now that's a problem, especially when you're using a swap file on a solid state drive, because the data that's been comes out of your physical memory in your computer, and it's written to the swap file or the page file, whichever name is used, because they all have different names and different operating system call them different things, but it's basically a page file, swap file, or virtual memory, whatever you call it. So eventually, because the swapping data is so fast, it retires blocks pretty quick. You know, blocks just get worn out, they get tired out very quickly, so your drive will shrink after a few years. And your way to test that is to use Smart Tools. You get a program called Smart Tools for looking in the actual drive's smart status, and it tells you what percentage your solid state drive is at. And I actually bought a few solid state drives second hand off eBay, and they came in at like 97% good, which means that they've got a bunch of retired blocks. So people tend to sell them on, I think they call it flipping. A lot of people call it flipping for some reason. I don't know why they call that, because yeah, that's to me is like a truck turning over. But anyway, so these people, they sell them off fairly cheap, but they get some money back, and then they buy a new drive, and they've got a brand new drive, and we're getting the hand-me-downs basically. So anyway, so what I've decided to do is, I'm waffling again and I'm going on. So what I've decided to do is to get one of these little caddies where I can plug in my solid state drives, and then when they get worn out, I can copy the data across to a fresh one at some point when they start to shrink in size. And also I've got some cables, and then I'm gonna install my Ubuntu on the physical drive. It's an experiment to see if how well it works, to see if it's any good on my computer. So I'm waiting for those bits to arrive. It's a bit of a risk because my computer's so old. I don't know, but Linux generally does support older hardware. It's always been well known for supporting old hardware. They actually talk about that, because it is much faster. It's a much faster system, and it's more reliable than Windows. The only problem with it is it's a bit of a steep learning curve, but it's just lately, especially Zorin, the Zorin operating system has become extremely much more like a Windows feel to it. It's got a lot of built-in software, well, that you can just click on install without having to mess around with command lines. So there's advantages to actually going to Linux. And not to mention the fact that it's pretty immune to viruses. I won't say it was completely immune, because let's face it, these days everything's changing in the market. There's such a lot of malware going around that's affecting people's Android phones. I think the only thing that seems to be pretty immune at the moment, as far as I'm aware, is Apple. But I'm not so sure, because I'm not an expert with Apple software, Apple products, so I can't really say if it's true or not. But my daughter claims that she's got an Apple and she's had no trouble with her phone. So if she's having no trouble, it must be good, because she's not very good with computers, technical things really. But anyway, I'm sidetracking again. So anyway, I just wanted to just mention what I'm thinking about doing. So it's not very expensive solution to my little problem with video editing, because at least if I can get access to my graphics card and make more use out of its capabilities, it means that I can speed up my video editing quite a bit, and I can just boot into that when I need to do video editing and go back into the other system when I want to do other things like surf the internet, because surfing the internet nowadays is just it's a minefield. It's got worse. I mean, you've got to watch what you step on, basically. As in what websites you visit, because there's such a lot of malicious things going around. I mean, all this stuff to do with phishing and data theft, bank account theft. It's got worse. It's got a lot worse, and you know why it's got worse. It's because of the fact that the whole planet is in a state of financial despair, or everyone's getting desperate, and unfortunately there's no discrimination between well, people that turn to crime. Unfortunately, they don't care whose pocket they're picking, basically. So it's a shame, but it's usually the other poor that suffer. So you get one poor person who turns to crime, and another poor person who's straight, who's struggling, who's trying to make ends meet, and they get ripped off, and it's not right. It's just not right, really. But these rich people, they can afford to put, they've got half a dozen firewalls between them and the outside world, so they can afford it, and whereas the rest of us can't. So yeah, it's just the sad way the world's going. You gotta look at ways to protect yourself now. If you don't do it, no one else will. As I say. Anyway, enough of my rant. Bye for now.